Number 10, Symptoms. Symptoms is an indie game we played on the channel, and in all honesty, it terrified me. The jump scares were constant and I never really knew what was coming next. The game jump scares you as soon as you enter the damn thing. Then it just gets worse from there, with gross noises and monsters hidden in the shadows. Legit, I did not notice one while filming, and while I was going through the footage, I saw it and I was like, oh dang. I ended up not being able to find what I had to do next, but I think it was because I was unwilling to mess with the TV again because I was so scared. If this game had been any worse, the video would not have been that long because I would have seen no reason to keep playing. This game is the reason I don't trust anyone anymore. Especially if you're sitting in a dark living room with a secret door and the TV off. Or if it's on and it's just playing static. That just triggers me. The whole game triggers me. Why can't I just play Minecraft? And at 9, Help Wanted. The 5 Nights at Freddy series made a big splash in the gaming industry over the last decade, making Scott Cawthon a household name and giving MatPat hours of content. But the latest title in the series, 5 Nights at Freddy's VR Help Wanted, is the scariest of the bunch, and for one simple reason. It's in VR. Sure, the other games have you sitting at a desk and sitting at a computer, but when the computer screen is literally sitting on your face and you have no way to prevent the inevitable jump scare from happening, you know you're going to be shaking in your cardboard pizza grease soaked boots. While the graphics aren't realistic, having the jump scare be on your face and having to do all these things around you to have to prevent those jump scares is going to make the game much more stressful, and that will make the jump scares oh so much more effective. But I haven't played it because I'm genuinely terrified. And at 8, Doki Doki Literature Club. This game disguises itself as our typical run-of-the-mill dating simulator, a book club that you join and somehow you're the only dateable one. So you make an attempt to get with one of the various girls in the club. However, this game is tagged with the descriptor psychological horror, and it's one to mess with your mind so bad you'll think you're an android. The game gets dark quickly, delving into themes of self-harm, suicide, and depression, along with a twisted main antagonist who is slowly eliminating the competition until it's only down to you and her. Who are the characters you can date, you ask? Just Monica. Sorry, I mean Natsuki, Sayori, Yuri, and just Monica. The game ends up getting more and more gruesome as you approach the end, with Monica killing off everyone else because she wants you. She even controls what they say at points. This is a very messed up game, and it was a cultural hit. It's also free on Steam, meaning it's just all the more accessible, especially to those who just want a normal dating sim. Just play the KFC one instead. Oh man, Colonel Sanders. I want your bucket. And at 7, Slender the 8 Pages. When this game got released in 2012, YouTube was flooded with videos of people playing this game. Even non-gaming channels tried their hand at collecting all 8 pages. This game was terrifying, especially at the time. Being in a dark forest with just a flashlight and having to scour what seemed to be an endless forest only to ultimately die in the end. Yeah. At the end of the game, after you find all 8 pages, you get killed by Slenderman. But you unlock daytime mode, so that's something, I guess. After beating daytime mode, you also unlock $20 mode, which plays a specific song whenever Slenderman is close, in reference to a meme where they said you could just hand Slenderman $20 and he'd leave you alone. The game involved sprinting, even though some people didn't know it. But even with the ability to sprint, the game was terrifying. This game was really what put Slenderman on the map when it comes to gaming, and it was really what spawned so many games based on the killer anyway. Is Slender a killer? I have no clue. And at 6, Until Dawn. The choose your own adventure horror experience was some pretty messed up stuff. One guy dresses up as a killer and fake kills his friends, and sometimes even causes real ones. Yikes. The characters you play as can end up surviving if you make the right choices. However, this is incredibly hard to do. The game was released in 2015 and got itself 2 sequels, a virtual reality spin-off called Until Dawn Rush of Blood in 2016, and a prequel called The Impatient in 2018. However, none of it would have been completed without the original game. The game features a branching story, so no 2 playthroughs will be the same unless you make the same choices. The horrific killer is later revealed to be, spoiler alert, Josh, the brother of the 2 girls who went missing after a terrible prank by their friends. Josh had brought those friends to a cabin to torment them, never knowing the true horror that would be inside. And yeah, it's pretty messed up. Halfway through at number 5, The Forest. I love this damn game. The Forest is an open world survival horror game with an actual story. You can do various things in this game, but no matter what you try, you'll be encountering mutants and cannibals in close quarters, and it'll make you drop one in your pants and nope right the hell out of there. This game is terrifying, and when you least expect it, a mutant is right behind you, whether it's a giant arm monster, a monster with 6 legs and 4 boobs, or what's called a cowman who will send you flying across the world but you'll still land on the island. Yeah, that powerful. Or the horrible cannibals who will consume the corpses of their fellow cannibals. But like, I feel like they have like an agreement or like a contract that when they're dead, everyone gets the permission to eat their corpses because like they're cannibals. And like you have to like sign it to join the crew. I mean, to be fair, you can eat them as well, but does that really make you a cannibal? Are they the same species as you, or are they basically Wendigos? Oh, and don't forget that you can wear the flesh of the mutants as armor. And it's the strongest armor in the game. Yeah, it's scary as hell. And at 4, Duck Season. Duck Season is the demonic version of Duck Hunt. We all wish we could have shot that damn dog to get his mocking ass out of the way. But what if we could do that? What if you did shoot the dog? What would he have done to you? This game answers that easily. Duck Season is a hunter with ridiculous graphics. Luckily it's summer vacation and mom has surprised you with a one-day rental of it. Unfortunately, as you binge play it, it becomes apparent that not all is right with Duck Season. This is the only other VR title on the list and it is all about surviving. With around 7 endings, this game has quite a bit of replayability, especially since it includes another 7 mini games that you can play inside of the main game. After shooting the dog, this cryptid will come out of the game and kill you and your family. Well, your mother, since your dad isn't around. Where could he be? The game ends with an ultimate showdown where you have to face off against the dog in your dark house, your mother laying on the ground dead, and the gun from Duck Hunt as your only protection. My god, it's terrifying. He has like a really bloody knife and he's coming at you. And at 3, The Evil Within 2. The Evil Within 2 is a third-person survival horror game published by Bethesda for Windows, PS4, and Xbox One in 2017, and it was the sequel to the 2014 game The Evil Within, obviously. 2 is typically favored over the other, aside from those who criticize the story and characters, due to its improved visuals, atmosphere, and gameplay. The game also features a crafting system where players can gather resources in order to craft new items and ammo, where they can craft at any time, but doing so at a workbench will cost less resources. If that's not good enough for you, in Japan it's known as Psycho Break 2. This game will literally break your psyche and turn you mad. It will unlock the evil within, too. Was that good or was that too much? Either way, everyone has evil within them. This game just shows you how to unleash it, and the monsters are just horrific and disgusting. And at 2, Paratopic. This low polygon game follows 3 different storylines, all with a chilling story. Smuggle contraband VHS tapes across the border. For those of you who don't know what a VHS tape is, this is a picture of one. I know, so old, so vintage. Discover the remnants of an illicit industry and prepare for your next assassination. This is Paratopic, an atmospheric retro 3D horror adventure that feels like the worst kind of cursed fever dream. Are there any different kind of fever dreams? Or is it just that one? Cursed. Having one of the best soundtracks of any game from 2018 as declared by Fact Magazine, this experimental first-person horror game has you cutting between various detailed stories. The game takes 45 minutes to play casually and has over an hour of wonderful dark ambient music to keep you on edge without pushing you over it. This makes for a wonderful horror game in and of itself. Mix that with the confusion of 3 different stories and you're in for one hell of an experience. $7. Go get it. Finally, and at number 1, Silent Hills PT. You knew this would be here. The Silent Hills playable teaser was a first-person horror experience with gameplay similar to that of Avarice, a game that we played here on the channel. With this game, the playable area is an L-shaped corridor with 2 rooms adjacent to it, along with some stairs that brings you back to the corridor, creating an endless loop. Each time you're back, something new changes, whether it be a mutant baby in the sink or a kid in a freezer. The whole time you keep encountering a ghost named Lisa, who if she catches you has a chance of triggering a terrible jump scare that will have you shaking for weeks while sending you back to the beginning. After you complete the final puzzle and escape, the game reveals it was a playable teaser for the next Silent Hills series of games called Silent Hills. It was removed, however, and unless you do some less than moral things, you won't be able to get your hands on it unless someone got it before they removed it. But my lord, this game is horrific. The kid in the freezer, oh my god.
And at number 10 is Call of Cthulhu. The horror genre owes a lot to H.P. Lovecraft, so naturally a game based off of his work would be pretty damn scary. While the game isn't the best of the bunch, it does manage to induce a whole lot of fear in the players, at least during the first half of the game that is, when you're unarmed exploring Innsmouth, which is filled with plenty of little horrors of its own. And at number 9 is Home. Sometimes the simpler, the scarier, as we're about to see in our next number on this list. Home is an indie game consisting entirely of 8-bit graphics, where you play a protagonist that wakes up in a strange house with a busted leg, and you have to set out to find what happened to your wife while you make your way back home. The game encourages players to jack up the sound and turn off the lights as they move closer and closer to your home, lit only by the protagonist's flashlights. The sheer simplicity of the game along with its sound design is enough to freak you right out. providing some chilling and ambiguous plot points and unexpected jumps. And at number 8 is Until Dawn. Working within the realm of the butterfly effect, Until Dawn is a game about a group of teens who return to their friend's cottage a year after his twin sisters were mysteriously killed on the property after a prank gone wrong. We slowly discover there's something more nefarious in the works around the cottage. Every action the player makes goes a long way. By the end of the game, you can still have your whole cast of characters alive, or entirely dead, or just a few remaining. And it's chock full of good scares, thrusting the responsibility of survival into the player's hands. And at number 7 is Alien Isolation. Set 15 years after the events of the 1979 Alien film, you play Ellen Ripley's daughter, Amanda, on a quest to find out what happened to her mother. With a focus on stealth, you have limited ammunition and must rely on your smarts to survive. And you won't be able to kill the alien, oh no. You've got to hide and run your way through the game. Many critics praised the game for capturing the tone of the original Ridley Scott film, and its stunning but mortifying environments that really lend to the mystery and terror that awaits you in the space station. And at number 6 is Slender the Arrival. Slender Man is an urban myth that over recent years has been getting a lot more attention, so it makes sense that there would be a game based on him. Sure enough to finish the game within one night, Slender the Arrival plops characters into a small town's mystery as you, unarmed, must escape from Slender Man's grip. What makes the game so scary is the lack of visibility when running around the forest, Slender's minions who come out at you viciously, and his ever-lurking presence in the distance watching you as you progress. Chilling. And at number 5 is Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Released in 2010 and later in 2016 for the PS4, Amnesia takes place in a Prussian castle. Similar to Home, you wake up and you have no idea how you got there. And there's monsters, of course. The gameplay also has a strong emphasis on physics-based puzzles, which sometimes help you with stealth, but other times make it incredibly difficult to get away from the monsters that pursue you when they see you. Unlike some of the other games on this list that require you to run and hide from the creatures chasing you, the monsters in this game are relentless. They'll tear through the building just to get to you. Doors don't mean
Run, run, run! Ah! No, where is it? Ah! Ah! Get down! Ah! Gotta go! Ah! Ah! Ah!
And when you hide in the dark to avoid them, you start to experience hallucinations, making it not an option you really want to take, unless you have to stay alive. And at number 4 is Resident Evil. This list wouldn't be complete without mentioning one of the biggest survival horror genre games in video game history. And Resident Evil is technically the game that began the survival horror genre, or at least started using that term back in 1996. Critics have called it one of the finest horror games ever created, along with launching one of the most successful series in gaming history. While we won't touch on the rest of the games in its series, it's worth noting that the 2002 remake of the original game was even more horrific, with updated graphics and even adding a few new horrors to the mix, including a zombie that rises from the dead and runs at you. Nothing like a terrifying sprint to get your blood boiling. And at number 3 is Outlast. To avoid giving away any spoilers for the newest Outlast game, we'll be focusing on the first in the Whistleblower DLC for this number. So Outlast is filled with a constant stream of terrors as you get trapped inside an insane asylum and slowly piece together the story of what happened. There's a lot of running, a lot of stealth, a lot of hiding, and a lot of capturing the horrific events you witness on your camcorder. Sometimes it's really hard to find a battery too. Personally, I wasn't too big of a fan of the last level of the game, but it still provided a nerve-wracking amount of tension and gore. And the rest of the game makes certain to keep you on the edge of your seat with the oh-so-disturbing territory it ventures into. And at number 2 is Silent Hill 2. Personifying psychological horror is no easy feat, and that alone is why Silent Hill 2 can be considered one of the greatest horror games of all time. While the first Silent Hill was praised for changing the genre, moving away from the B-movie horror elements and gave us more of the horror similar to that of Japanese horror films, the second's narrative exceeds that of its predecessor, and presents us with some terrifying creations. Who for the most part are metaphorical of the protagonist James' psychological trauma, and that's some. And finally, in at number 1 we have PT. As we mentioned before, simplicity can go a long way in making something terrifying. So PT, which was short for Playable Teaser, is a first-person game that was designed and directed by Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro, and it was a teaser for the game Silent Hills, a cancelled installment of the Silent Hill series. After the cancellation, PlayStation removed it from their store, and, well, good luck finding it now, despite the intense criticism that move received. So why is it adored? Well, it's a hallway on loop, each time altering ever so slightly, where you encounter some terrifying supernatural occurrences, and it forces players to investigate frightening events and solve cryptic puzzles. You're also defenseless with no means to protect yourself. For a demo so simple, it was complex, horrific, thick with tension, and received major acclaim in its short lifespan. And at number 10, Stalker: Shadow of Chernobyl. Shadow of Chernobyl is a first-person shooter survival horror that's set in an alternate reality. What's gone down? Well, a second nuclear disaster has happened at the famous Chernobyl nuclear power plant exclusion zone, causing strange otherworldly mutations to occur. You assume the role of the Stalker, a person who has amnesia, who comes across 5 different breeds of mutants in the zone. There's the Bloodsuckers, name's kind of explanatory. There are the Snorks, who almost look human and wear gas masks. There are Poltergeists, which are extremely mutated humans who are missing all of their body below their hips and seem invisible. There's the Pseudo-Giants, which is a giant mutated ball of several humans combined, and lastly, Controllers, who have psychic-esque powers that disorient you in short bursts. In addition to the mutants that you'll come across, there's a whole lot of supernatural aspects of play in the game. It also scores big points for atmosphere. Not only is the sound design and music really on point, but the lighting in the game even offers up its own scares, with the way that your flashlight moves sometimes casting shadows that will have you double taking, fearing that there's more lurking nearby than there is in actuality. And at number 9, Resident Evil 4. There's a lot of fantastic Resident Evil games to choose from that could have landed a spot on this list, but Resident Evil 4 tends to take the cake when it comes to being the scariest of the bunch. It's considered to be one of the best survival horror games out there to boot, pioneering the over-the-shoulder third-person perspective in the genre. You play as Leon S. Kennedy, former Raccoon City police officer 6 years after the events of Resident Evil 2, on a mission to rescue the US President's daughter, Ashley Graham. Despite how annoying many players found Ashley to be, the game itself features some of the most terrifying foes in the franchise to date, combined with revolutionary combat mechanics that have made their way into other games in the series and in the genre since. And at number 8, Slender: The Arrival. Slender may not be a popular choice on this list compared to some other titles, but this relatively indie game still manages to bring the fright factor home. Slender is of course about Slender Man, the urban legend that has made its way from creepypasta online to a full-blown pop culture sensation, even scoring a poorly made film that studios thought would pull in the big bucks at the box office. Despite the recent questionability about the character's representation, Slender: The Arrival, the game, is definitely one adaptation of the myth that is worthwhile. It's an expanded title from the game Slender: The 8 Pages. Like others on this list, it's a survival horror where you are armed with only a flashlight as you hunt down answers concerning your missing best friend, which unravels a greater mystery concerning missing children, which are of course connected to the Slender Man. Regardless of whether the story entices you, the gameplay itself is what lands this title on our list. You explore abandoned areas, each with different objectives, often being hunted down by Slender himself. There's a level in a mine that's particularly terrifying, where you're chased down by a young child in a hoodie as well as Slender. That child don't look like a normal child either. Huge chunks of the game build tension. One of the final chapters takes you inside the recording of a friend investigating a farm, which requires you to solve a few puzzles but manages to create so much tension in the process that when you do finally get pursued by one of the missing children who is now deformed, you'll be on the edge of your seat practically pooping yourself, out of fear, of course. And at number 7, Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is often seen as one of the best horror games of all time, and it's definitely the best released game the franchise has ever had to offer. It's disturbing, unsettling, and places players in a world that manages to get under their skin in real life. You play as James Sunderland, who enters the town of Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his deceased wife, saying she's waiting for him there. The game employs psychological tactics as well, all of which mess with the player as you progress in the narrative. In addition to that, many players see the encounter with Pyramid Head as being one of the scariest moments to ever occur in video game history, and the conclusion of the game itself is one that has lingered with many a player for years. And at 6, Penumbra: The Black Plague. The Black Plague is the second title in the Penumbra series, which follows a character named Philip through an underground research base. It's an exploration game where flight is mightier than fight, and leaves you avoiding enemies using stealth tactics and solving puzzles. You start the game by waking up in a locked room, escaping through an air vent, and then discovering that you are inside a facility, which has infected zombie-like creatures. You've been infected too, but instead of joining the hive mind, you slowly slip into insanity as one of the other infected takes over, taunting you with sarcastic and crude dialogue throughout the game. The Black Plague is the spiritual successor to our number 1 on this list as well, but more on that later. And at 5, Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation plays on the elements that made the first few Alien films so fantastic. You're on a deserted space station playing as Ripley's daughter, Amanda, tracking down a lost flight recorder, all while trapped inside this space station with none other than a xenomorph. Inspired heavily by the first Alien film, the game isn't an action-packed one. Instead, it requires you to not get killed by the xenomorph, and not be the killer yourself since you're unarmed, creating exponentially more tension that way. There's also a handful of malfunctioning androids scattered throughout the station's rooms as well that add another eerie element to the title. Overall, its title really speaks volumes for the game as a whole. You do feel entirely isolated and hunted. If xenomorphs aren't your thing, how about necromorphs? And at number 4, Dead Space. Dead Space is also set in, you guessed it, outer space. It's another survival horror game, and puts you in the shoes of of protagonist Isaac Clarke in the year 2508. You're a ship systems engineer who's forced to fight his way through the mining starship that he works on in search of his girlfriend and of safety. The crew have all been butchered and their corpses reanimated, turning them into something called necromorphs. A new take on the zombie genre that is appalling, terrifying, and forces you to use a mechanism called strategic dismemberment in order to fight them off and kill them for good. Take a guess of what that entails. It's a gruesome deep space adventure that will haunt your dreams, from its startling atmosphere to its vicious means of fighting off your foes. There ain't no effective headshots here, people, which made many players approach this shooter in a different way than other titles with similar themes and premises. In at 3, Outlast. While some may argue that Outlast 2 is a better game, there's something about the first title in the series that left us feeling absolutely mortified by its end. And by that something, we mean pretty much everything up until the reveal of what exactly Walrider was. Decent level, but definitely not as scary as the underground caverns under the asylum that you need to navigate to get there, let alone the, whole damn asylum that you work your way through during the rest of the game. So, let's jump back a sec. When Outlast starts off, you're a journalist armed with only a camcorder and its night vision feature, heading to the game's asylum to investigate some mysterious happenings. You get there, and immediately it is scary as hell. You have to break into the building only to discover that something has gone horribly wrong. All of the security guards are dead. Your first real mission in the game is to start up a generator, a moment that is perhaps one of the scariest, as you find yourself navigating around in a flooded basement searching for levers that you need to turn on, all while avoiding getting your head smashed in by one of the freed asylum patients who, of course, wants nothing more than to satiate his thirst for blood. You've gotta run, you've gotta hide, and you've gotta hope that these mental patients don't find you. The rest of the game sees you employing similar tactics, with you being utterly defenseless and needing to constantly find batteries in order to make your camera run. That night vision becomes oh so precious. There's also some particularly gruesome moments that are hard to watch. But overall, it's not so much the story in Outlast that makes it great, but rather the mechanics of the game itself, and the pace in which the game flows, scaring the likes of even the most seasoned horror gamers out there. And at number 2, PT. PT is often considered the best horror game of all time, despite the fact that it never actually got made. So for context, if you've ever heard of it before, PT stands for Playable Trailer. It was a teaser game released on the PlayStation Store, a first-person psychological horror game developed by Kojima Productions and directed by Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro. So yeah, kind of a big deal. It was meant to be a teaser for the game Silent Hills, the next installment in the Silent Hill franchise that was eventually cancelled. After the cancellation, the game was removed from the PlayStation Store, and the option for players to reinstall it was also removed, which caused a lot of controversy and made some PS4s go for quite the expensive price tag online if they had the game installed on the system, although eBay actually cracked down on that. Anywho, despite only being a trailer, it was critically acclaimed for its visuals, its ability to create extreme tension, and of course its puzzles. Essentially, you awaken in a haunted house and explore the same L-shaped corridor as it continues to loop, with supernatural occurrences throughout. In order to progress, you need to solve cryptic puzzles and investigate other terrifying events. There's no means of defending yourself either, like in previous Silent Hill games. Its claustrophobic and repetitive environment not only invoked fear, but a deep curiosity about what would happen next, and put the player in a state of vulnerability that not many other horror games have managed to achieve in the past. Despite its short lifespan, the trailer has had a massive impact, largely influencing other horror games that have come out in recent years. There's actually a remake of it that recently surfaced called Unreal PT, which is available for PC, and players can even try it out in VR. Finally, in at number 1, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is one of those titles that manages to scare the crap out of you before anything scary actually happens. It follows the story of a man named Daniel, who has amnesia, and wakes up in the Brennenburg Castle in 1839 with the knowledge of only 3 things. 1, that his name is Daniel, 2, where he lives, and 3, that something is hunting him. The Dark Descent has a very intriguing mechanic. The more time you spend hiding in the dark while avoiding the utterly horrific monsters in the game, the more your sanity level drops, which alters your perception, and can cause you to see and hear things that are actually there. This aspect of the game exists right from the get-go, establishing a really uncanny feeling for players as they begin their journey through the castle. It's part psychological thriller, part survival horror, that once again puts you in a position of needing to rely on flight over fight, with players often having to barricade themselves into rooms in order to avoid the monsters chasing you throughout the gothic building's corridors. All in all, its psychological aspect is really what lands it in our number 1 spot. That and, it's a full game compared to something like PT. Definitely worth a try, and it will probably scare the crap out of you.